The phone rang at 3 a.m. Frank Sinatra knew it wasn't good news. Nobody calls at 3 a.m. with good news. He picked up. The voice on the other end was calm, cold, threatening. "We need to talk about Sammy." Frank's blood ran cold. He knew exactly what this was about. November 1960. Sammy Davis Jr. had just announced his engagement to May Britt, a beautiful Swedish actress. She was white. Sammy was black. And in 1960 America, that was more than controversial. It was dangerous. To understand why this wedding nearly got Sammy killed, you need to understand America in 1960. Interracial marriage was illegal in 31 states. In many places, a black man, even looking at a white woman the wrong way, could get him lynched. And Sammy Davis Jr. wasn't just looking. He was marrying one. The backlash was immediate and vicious. Sammy started receiving death threats within hours of the announcement. Hundreds of letters, many with explicit descriptions of how they planned to kill him. The NAACP was divided. Some supported Sammy's right to marry who he loved. Others worried it would set back the civil rights movement. White supremacist groups openly called for Sammy's murder. But the most dangerous threat came from organized crime. The mob controlled Las Vegas, and Sammy was one of their biggest draws. He performed regularly at mob-owned casinos. He brought in huge crowds. He made them millions. But the mob also had rules. And one of those rules was you don't embarrass us. Sammy marrying a white woman was, in the mob's eyes, an embarrassment. Many mobsters were Italian, and they had their own racial prejudices. They didn't want one of their star performers making headlines for interracial marriage. It was bad for business, they said. It would alienate customers. It had to stop. Sam Giancana, the Chicago outfit boss, was particularly angry. Giancana had invested heavily in Vegas casinos where Sammy performed. He'd made Sammy rich through these gigs. And now Sammy was doing something that could hurt the bottom line. Giancana called Frank Sinatra. "Frank, we got a problem with your boy Sammy." "What kind of problem?" "Sam, he's marrying a white girl. That can't happen." Frank felt his stomach tighten. "Sam, who Sammy marries is his business." "No, Frank, it's our business. We got casino owners threatening to cancel his contracts. We got customers saying they won't come see a guy married to a white woman. This is costing us money. So, what do you want to do about it?" "Talk to him. Tell him to call it off. Find him a nice black girl to marry instead. I don't care. But this white girl thing doesn't happen." And if he doesn't call it off? There was a long pause. Then Sam's voice got quieter, more dangerous. "Then we'll have to solve the problem ourselves." Frank understood the threat. Solve the problem meant hurt Sammy. Maybe kill him. Frank hung up the phone, his hands shaking. Frank and Sammy had been friends for over a decade. They'd met in the early 1950s. Two entertainers tried to make it in a racist industry. Frank had taken Sammy under his wing, brought him into the Rat Pack, made sure Sammy got the same treatment as everyone else despite the color of his skin. It wasn't easy. Vegas in the 1950s was brutally segregated. Black performers could entertain white audiences, but couldn't stay in hotels where they performed. They had to sleep in boarding houses on the west side of town. They couldn't eat in the casino restaurants. They couldn't gamble at the tables. They were second-class citizens, even when they were the stars of the show. Frank hated that. When the Rat Pack performed together, Frank insisted Sammy get equal treatment. If Sammy couldn't stay in a hotel, Frank threatened to cancel the show. If Sammy couldn't eat in the restaurant, Frank would eat somewhere else. Frank used his power to force integration, at least when it came to his friends. The casino owners hated it, but they needed Frank more than they needed their racist policies. So they made exceptions for Sammy Davis Jr. He could stay in the hotel. He could eat in the restaurant. He could gamble at the tables. All because Frank Sinatra demanded it. That's why Sammy trusted Frank. Frank had proven, over and over, that he'd stand by Sammy even when it cost him, even when it made powerful people angry, even when it would have been easier to just go along with the racism. But this was different. This wasn't just about where Sammy could sleep or eat. This was about Sammy's life. The mob was threatening to kill him. And Frank had to decide how far his loyalty would go. Frank called Sammy the next morning. "We need to talk." In person. They met at Frank's house in Palm Springs. Sammy arrived nervous. He'd heard about the death threats. He knew the mob was angry. He could guess why Frank wanted to talk. "Sammy," Frank said carefully, "have you thought about what Mary May is going to cost you?" Sammy nodded. "I know it's going to be hard. Frank, I know people are angry, but I love her. I can't live my life based on what racists think." "I'm not talking about racists, Sammy. I'm talking about the mob. Sam Giancana called me last night. He wants you to call off the wedding." Sammy's face went pale. "And if I don't?" Frank didn't want to say it, but he had to. "Then they're going to hurt you. Maybe worse." There was a long silence. Sammy stood up and walked to a window. "Frank, I've spent my whole life being told what I can't do. Can't stay in that hotel. Can't eat in that restaurant. Can't date that girl. I'm tired, Frank. I'm so tired of being told I'm not good enough because of my skin." Frank felt his heart breaking. "I know, Sammy." Sammy turned to face Frank. "So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to marry May. And if they want to kill me for it, then I guess they'll kill me. But I'm not living in fear anymore." Frank saw the determination in Sammy's eyes. He knew Sammy meant it, and Frank had to make a choice. He could walk away, tell Sam Giancana he'd tried, but Sammy wouldn't listen. That would keep Frank safe. Or he could stand with Sammy, risk the mob's anger, and fight for his friend. Frank made his decision. "Okay, Sammy, if you're doing this, we're doing this together. You're not facing this alone." "Frank, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. You're my brother. And nobody threatens my brother." Over the next few weeks, Frank worked behind the scenes. He called in favors. He talked to other mobsters he knew, trying to get them to ease the pressure on Sammy. He made it clear that anyone who hurt Sammy would have to deal with Frank Sinatra. It was a risky move. Frank was already on thin ice with the mob because of his Kennedy connections. Bobby Kennedy's war on organized crime had made Frank a liability. And now Frank was defying them again over Sammy's wedding. But Frank had leverage. He was still the biggest draw in Vegas. Casinos made millions when Frank performed. The mob needed him. Frank gambled that they needed him more than they needed to punish Sammy. Sam Giancana called Frank again. "Frank, you're making this very difficult." "I'm not trying to make it difficult, Sam. I'm just saying Sammy's getting married, and anyone who has a problem with that has a problem with me. You're willing to go to war over this?" "If I have to." There was a long pause. Frank could hear Sam breathing on the other end. Then Sam said, "You're a stubborn son of a bitch, Frank. I've been told that before." Sam laughed, but it wasn't a friendly laugh. "All right, Frank. Sammy can have his wedding, but this costs you. You understand? You're using up goodwill here. Next time I call in a favor, you better deliver." "I understand." "And Frank, one more thing. Sammy better keep his head down after this. No more publicity stunts. No more making waves. He marries this girl, fine. But then he shuts up and gets back to work. Deal?" "Deal." Frank hung up feeling exhausted. He bought Sammy his wedding, but at a price. Frank now owed the mob a favor. And mob favors always came due eventually. But Frank didn't regret it. Sammy was his friend, his brother. And you don't abandon your brother, even when it costs you. The wedding took place on November 13th, 1960. It was small, intimate, carefully controlled. Only close friends and family attended. The location was kept secret until the last minute because of the death threats. Frank was there, of course. He stood next to Sammy, making sure everyone knew where he stood. Dean Martin was there too, the Rat Pack showing solidarity. But the atmosphere was tense. Security was tight. Everyone was nervous. Sammy kept glancing at the doors, half expecting someone to burst in shooting. When the officiant asked if anyone objected to the marriage, there was a moment of terrible silence. Everyone held their breath. Then the moment passed, and the ceremony continued. Sammy and May were married. Against all odds, despite the threats, despite the mob, despite racist America, they'd done it. After the ceremony, Frank pulled Sammy aside. "How do you feel?" Sammy smiled, but there were tears in his eyes. Terrified, relieved, happy. I don't know, Frank. All of it. Frank put his arm around Sammy's shoulders. You did the right thing. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Thank you, Frank, for everything. I know what this cost you. Frank shrugged. What are friends for? But the consequences of the wedding were real and immediate. Several casinos canceled Sammy's contracts. Hate mail poured in for months. Maybert's acting career essentially ended. No studio wanted to hire an actress married to a black man. And Sammy and May couldn't appear in public together in many places without risking violence. The marriage lasted 7 years. The pressure, the racism, the constant threats. It was too much. They divorced in 1968. Sammy later said that marrying May was both the bravest thing he'd ever done and the biggest mistake. Not because he didn't love her, but because the world wouldn't let them be happy. Frank's relationship with the mob deteriorated further after Sammy's wedding. The favor Frank owed Sam Giancana came due multiple times. Frank had to do things he didn't want to do, help people he didn't want to help, all because he'd stood up for Sammy. But Frank never regretted it. Years later, an interviewer asked Frank about the most important thing he'd ever done. Frank thought for a long moment. Then he said, I stood up for Sammy when the mob wanted to hurt him. That mattered more than any record I made or any movie I did. Why? Because that's when I proved to myself that I was more than just a singer. I was a man with principles. And when it mattered, when my friend's life was on the line, I chose right over easy. Did it cost you? Oh, yeah, Frank said with a bitter laugh. It cost me plenty, but some things are worth the cost. Sammy Davis Jr. died in 1990. Frank was too ill to attend the funeral, but he sent a wreath with a card. It said simply, You were the bravest man I ever knew. Rest easy, brother. That wedding in November 1960 was more than just Sammy marrying May. It was a statement, a refusal to bow to racism, a refusal to let the mob dictate who you could love, and a testament to Frank Sinatra's loyalty. When the phone rang at 3 a.m. with that threat against Sammy, Frank could have walked away. He could have told Sammy sorry. It's too dangerous. Call off the wedding. Nobody would have blamed him. But Frank didn't do that. He stood with his friend. He faced down the mob. He risked his own safety and career. Because that's what friendship meant to Frank Sinatra. The mob gave Frank 24 hours to stop Sammy's wedding. Frank's response was simple and defiant. No, Sammy's getting married, and if you have a problem with that, you have a problem with me. It was one of the bravest things Frank Sinatra ever did. Not performing for presidents. Not winning Oscars. Not conquering Vegas. Standing up for his black friend's right to marry who he loved. Even when the most dangerous men in America said no. That's the real story of Sammy Davis Jr.'s wedding. A love that defied racism. A friendship that defied the mob. And a moment when Frank Sinatra proved that loyalty wasn't just a word. It was a choice. And when it mattered most, Frank chose right.